My name is Katie Riley. I am the president of the board for Washington County Kids, and I wanted to welcome you all tonight. Washington County Kids' purpose is to increase access to out-of-school time programs. And so we're very excited to be hosting this webinar tonight and to have you be joining us for this presentation. I also want to introduce Larry Crepeau, who's our new executive director, and Jessica Sim. You can wave, guys. And Jessica is our program event coordinator. Our speaker is going to be Alan Taggart, and we will talk a little bit more about him in a couple of minutes. We have an interpreter tonight, and that's Luisa Aldama. And I would like her to give people who speak Spanish the instructions on how to join the interpretation channel. So go ahead, Luisa.
Hola, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Luisa Aldama y voy a ser su intérprete para este webinario. Primero que nada, dentro de su computadora, usted va a ir a la parte donde dice más. Va a encontrar la parte que dice traducción o interpretación. Es un globito y usted va a dar clic ahí al idioma que usted quiere, en este caso español, y lo que usted va a escuchar es, en la parte de atrás va a escuchar a la persona hablando en inglés y como sonido principal va a escuchar mi voz interpretando y así puede cambiar de un idioma a otro si lo prefiere. Gracias. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we will start the interpretation now. And I want to note that we will be having a door prize at the end of the session. The prize is books that you can have for your children. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that at the very end. We will also have an evaluation at the end, and we will give you a few minutes to fill that out as well. But that'll be at the very end. And we really appreciate your participation in this talk, this question and answer period and stuff. It's always nice to have people show their faces a little bit so that when we have questions, then we know where those questions are coming from and can see everybody. But it is totally up to you what you want to do. So at this time, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening. Alan Taggart has always been inspired by 4-H's commitment for youth to learn by doing. In his career with 4-H, he has focused exclusively on engaging first-generation 4-H youth, delivering high-quality, memorable experiences, and getting kids outdoors. The main areas he conducts research in are youth program experiences, like quality, positive youth development, and outdoor education. He has a passion for helping others through meaningful service and building relationships of trust. He is an assistant professor of practice for Oregon State University 4-H, Youth Development, and OSU Extension Service in Washington County. And we are very pleased to have him with us tonight. And go ahead, Alan. And by the way, we will be watching the chat so that he doesn't necessarily have to, but we will make sure that any questions you have can be relayed to him so that he can answer those questions. So go ahead, Alan.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. As was mentioned, my name is Alan Taggart. I live and work in Beaverton, Oregon. So really excited to be here and to talk with all of you. I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint here. We're going to be talking about a few things and then have a time to have some discussion. And really, this whole topic came about because of the things that people are dealing with their kids right now. So it's so important that we talk about how we can help our children improve their social skills and their relationships. I'll also say I am a parent myself. I have 4 children from 9 years old to 1 year old. And so I've got 9, 7, 3, and 1 year old. And I am not a perfect parent. I am not a perfect person. I do youth development as my profession, and I really love it. And I'm excited to share some best practices and some guidelines with you, but hope that you yourself will work with your own kids and find ways to improve, because that's where it all begins, is by attending classes like this. Attending a class like this is the first step to learning how to become a better parent and just to become better engaged with your kids and help them engage better. So really excited to share this with you. I'm going to do a little introduction to 4-H. We are a youth serving nonprofit. We are the largest youth serving nonprofit in the United States. And the reason for that is we exist in every single county and reservation in the United States. So if there's not a scout troop or a YMCA or a Boys and Girls Club, there is 4-H. So we engage almost 7 million kids a year. We engage tens of thousands of kids in Oregon each year, thousands of kids here in Washington County. And we really pride ourselves in the 4-H's, which stand for head, heart, hands, and health. We really want all of the kids that we work with, and just all kids anywhere, to have the skills that they need to be successful in life and to be leaders. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is like, how do we get our kids in that mode, in that focus? So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So we're going to start with a brand new model that has been researched about here in Oregon and is now being adopted by national 4-H across the nation. So it's called the 4-H Thriving Model for Positive Youth Development. So what does that even mean? Let's talk about it. We have the very first level. So I'm going to skip ahead. There's like this beautiful flower, right? We want all these long-term outcomes for our kids, but it all starts with the soil, the things that we as parents, or even anyone working with a kid, that might be a teacher, that might be a coach, that might be a counselor, it might be a parent, it might be a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle. We have control over the developmental context, which is all the areas that we can encourage a kid to do. The very first thing is finding out their sparks. And when we say what their sparks are, those are things that they are really interested in, or they might be interested in. We have so many kids that join 4-H that have never touched a bow and arrow before. And then they do archery through 4-H, and they realize, oh my gosh, I'm really good at this. I really enjoy this. And they find their spark by stepping outside their comfort zone and trying that. Or they might participate in one thing that's been very, very popular lately. We do salmon in the classroom, where they raise salmon eggs in a fish tank, and they are actually touching fish and realizing, oh my gosh, like this is something really cool. I want to learn more about fish. I might want to become a biologist. Or it might even be as simple as attending an event, and they realize that they really actually are good at public speaking, and that's something they never tried before. And then they try it, and then they realize, oh my gosh, like this is something I really want to do. And so sometimes it takes stepping outside their comfort zone to discover a spark, but taking time to figure out what those sparks are can be really important. And sometimes that spark is they really enjoy Fortnite and Minecraft. And something is you have to work through that and see what you can do to increase more sparks, but also run with the things that they are really interested in. So after that, you've got belonging, which is providing spaces where they feel like they can be a part of a group. And again, this might be in a class setting. It might be in a 4-H club. It might be at a Boys and Girls Club. It might be at a YMCA program or a THPRD program with the Parks and Rec Department, where they feel like they're part of a team, or they're part of a group, they're part of a club, they're part of something that shares a commonality. Because kids need that feeling. They need to feel like they are part of something bigger than themselves. And the next thing that goes along with that is relationships. These are relationships with other kids. These are relationships with adults who care about them. These are relationships with, it might be older kids that also are kind of mentoring them, because there's a lot of impact that can be made from what the research calls near peer relationships, where an elementary school kid might listen to a high school kid teaching them about biology and about fish than maybe me or any other adult or their teacher. And so that's another way that relationships can really start that growth. The last thing is engagement. That means it's actually something that they want to do, or something that they feel like they can be immersed in and continue on. It's not just something that they're being forced to do, or that they feel like that is a waste of their time. We definitely want to do something that engages the kids fully in their attention. And again, it might be at first difficult because it's new, the new situation, but if they're trying something new for the first time, that is. But these are the 4 elements that we can really have control over as parents, or in any setting, whether that's a camp or a club or anything, that really can influence their experience later on and help them thrive, which is the next thing. So once we have those things set in the soil there, this leads to the indicators, what we call the indicators that a kid is thriving. And it's not that they're doing this all the time. So I'm looking at positive emotions right there. Teenagers are not always going to have positive emotions. Like, we're human beings. We're not always going to have positive emotions, but this can be an outcome. This can be an indicator that things are going in the right direction, that they have positive emotions about the thing that they're participating in. Growth mindset is an indicator that they feel like they can improve. You may have heard that it's growth mindset is where you realize that I can work harder to become better at something. And it's also us as parents making sure we're praising our kids rather than saying, hey, you are awesome. That's not bad to say, but you could also say, hey, I can tell you worked really hard at that. I can tell you worked really hard to make a relationship with that other kid. I can tell you worked really hard to speak up and to put yourself out there, and praise their effort. Because when we're talking about building up social abilities and building relationships, we want to make sure we're praising it and recognizing the effort of the kid. The next thing, openness to challenge and discovery. That just openness that, hey, I want to try a new thing. That wasn't so bad. I want to try it some more, trying a new activity or a new thing. The next one, hopeful purpose, feeling like they do have a purpose, that they are part of something bigger than themselves and can carry forward. The next thing is pro-social orientation. My oldest, this is something that he's been working on. And I see he's actually been participating in 4-H archery. I teach a 4-H archery class. And he has been seeking out other kids during practice. And when we hold our archery practices, he's talking to other kids about things. And I think that also links in with transcendent awareness, where the kid realizes, oh, there's other things that are outside of me. The world doesn't just revolve all around me. It's being aware that there's other people surrounding me that I have an effect on. There's other family members that my behavior have an effect on. And having that realization can really indicate that they are thriving. So we already talked about positive emotions, but those also, in regulating negative emotions, can also happen with goal setting and making sure that they are managing goals that they feel like they can achieve. You may have heard about SMART goals before. When kids are setting a goal, they want to make sure it's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's realistic, and it's time-driven. So again, making sure that kids are shooting for something and progressing. All right. So from there, we can develop further into these developmental outcomes, that they have a positive attitude toward academics. They're competent in their social skills. They have personal standards. They can connect with others. They have personal responsibility. They contribute to society, to their school, to their family. And then that, again, leads into the long-term outcomes that we want for all our kids. We want them to be happy. We want them to have well-being. We want them to be employable, economically stable. We want them to be civically engaged. We want them to be able to have good work, good jobs. And so this is where we're shooting for, from the base level to the long-term stuff. So let's talk about how we do that, specifically with social skills and relationships. I'm going to share with you two tools. The first one is leveling up, and the second one is really designing for intrinsic motivation. So first, leveling up. How many of you have ever heard of the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears? Okay, so I don't see all the cameras on, but yep, I got some thumbs up. So Goldilocks and Three Bears, she walks in the house, the porridge was too hot, too cold, just right. Or the couches or the chairs were too hard, too soft, just right. And beds were too hard, too soft, just right. So when working with our kids and thinking about what their needs are, every kid is going to be different. What might work for one kid is going to be different for another kid. So we need to see where our kids are at socially and give them something that they can level up with, that they can go from one thing to the next. It might be a little challenging, but we're not trying to go from I am completely shy, not one. A difference of levels that we can progress towards. And the research shows that that is something that can be effective. So that's one tool that you can use when working with your kids. Think about where they're at and see where you can level them up. You know, nothing that's too easy, something that's not too hard, but just right. It gives them that challenge that they can level up. And again, if they really like video games, speak that language. Say, okay, what are the achievements that we're trying to get? What are the things that we're trying to do to advance to the next level? Okay, let's talk about motivation. So defining motivation, it's a state of interest and energy that directs an individual towards taking and persisting in action. So what does that look like? So we have got this spectrum, especially in working with teenagers or older kids. You've got one side where it's like, I am not interested. I am amotivated. I am completely apathetic. I don't care. To extrinsic motivation, when you're providing a reward or something. It's like, okay, if you do your homework, then you can get a treat or you get screen time. That's a big thing in my house, is getting screen time. So that's an extrinsic motivator. It's like, oh, if I do X, then I get Y. And then there's intrinsic motivation, which is I'm doing it because I want to do it. I really want to do it because I am truly interested in it. So asking a question to y'all, we've got two images here, one student who's completely amotivated and one that's intrinsically motivated. How hard would you study for your next math test, or how hard would these students study for this next math test? Comparing both of them. How hard do you think they'll study from one end to the other? How hard do you think these two students will study for their next math test? You throw it in the chat, you can unmute. Well, one thing is that there's going to be a major difference in their studying. There's going to be the one who is really focused on doing it because they really enjoy math or they really want to get a good grade. That's an extrinsic motivator, but they may also really, really like math. But then it's going to be really difficult for the student who is really not wanting to do it. I remember those days. That's okay. And what we're going to talk about is how do we get towards that intrinsic motivator. So these are the things that really affect intrinsic motivation, which a lot of kids are going through. They are figuring out, how can I explain and predict myself? Figuring out, who am I? What is my self-concept? They're figuring out their social situations. What are my roles as a family member or a friend or a group member? And then self-esteem. What is my sense of self-worth? What is contributing to me as a person? So all of these factors affect someone's ability to be intrinsically motivated. So let's give an example of Wonder Woman. She obviously knows who she is. She's an Amazonian. She's strong. She's powerful. She values justice. She values equality. She knows what she enjoys. She enjoys adventure. She knows that she is courageous, that she's smart, a superior warrior, and she prefers peace. So again, by identifying these things, she knows what would intrinsically motivate her. So it's so important that we also help our kids find that out. They're growing up, but we can help them figure out, what do you stand for? What roles do you play? And what do you want to do? And again, it's a process. Like, it's not going to happen overnight, but this is something that when we're helping kids grow into the people that they're going to be, these are some things that we can do. So here are some ideas of how to activate that intrinsic motivation. First of all, avoid helicoptering. So that means, as a parent, you're not hovering over them, making sure that everything's going right. It's okay to let kids figure things out on their own. It's okay to let kids fail and to learn from their mistakes. We want them to figure things out for themselves and give them that choice to figure things out for themselves. The other thing, avoid incentives and punishments. And the reason for that is you want to make sure that you're not doing extrinsic motivation. You want them to do it because they enjoy doing it. You can also point out links between the new activity and something that participants like. Hey, this is just like we're building a Lego robot right now as part of this activity. Isn't this just like Minecraft? Like, you have to build things up. So trying to tie things together of how whatever you're doing relates to what they might enjoy. Also, choose activities participants like or have a special interest in. When you're looking at a menu of different youth programs or an after-school program or anything, walk through it with them and see, there's a whole checklist here. What really speaks to you? What do you want to try out? And if they're totally apathetic and they're like, I don't want to do anything, it's like, well, we got to pick something. What sounds really interesting? And then really hang on to the things that they actually perk up at and see what they really are interested in. Another thing is inquire what interests participants may have in relation to the activity. So if your kid is doing something, see what else they're interested in. And the last one is theming. This is something where we really can tell a story, and we can say, hey, we're having a Minecraft day at this camp. We're having a Lego day at this camp. We're having Harry Potter chemistry or wizarding chemistry. That's something that we do a lot in 4-H, is we try to theme things. But as a parent, you can also say, you can theme things with the holidays that are coming up. It's like, hey, it's 4th of July. We're doing a red, white, and blue sugar density drink, where you can see there's the red Gatorade, there's the blue Powerade, and then the white Sobe pina colada drink. So, and talking about all the science and things around that. So these are some techniques that you as a parent can use. And if you have any questions, we have times for, this is my contact info here, and happy to chat about any questions.
So, Alan, we have a question in the chat or in the Q&A. Said, our son is at a stage where he is very focused on himself. When he talks to others, the communication seems to go one way. How can we help him to be a better listener and acknowledge others?
That is a great question. That is something that is so important, is to provide, again, those level up opportunities, and talking about how that looks like with them, and talk about what that might look like in a social situation. And there are so many amazing tips, like Googling conversation starters. Something that my father taught me as a kid was talk about people's family, he called it FORM, which stands for family and friends, occupation, recreation, and message. So I would just really ask about family and friends, talk about what do you do for fun. You know, as a kid, you don't really have an occupation, but recreation, you could talk about that and start there and say, this is another phrase that my father taught me. You need to not be focused on being interesting. You need to be interested. And it takes practice. It's not going to be an overnight thing. But those were some tips that have helped me and also the kids that I work with. And also, frankly, my kids, like that's something that we're working on too, where we just moved to a new house and the neighbor kids came over and we had to talk about, okay, you just totally ignore those kids. Let's build that relationship up. And we were able to try again. And that's the beauty of this, is that it's not going to be perfect. They're growing up. It's going to be messy. So that's part of it, is learn from your failure and try again. And that's okay. We have that growth mindset.
So here's another question. Any advice for shy parents on how to reach out and connect with other parents, helping our kids to connect?
That is, I feel there's so many things that have been written about how hard it is to be an adult, and you're trying to help your kids step outside their comfort zone. That a lot of power comes from modeling. And whether that is you have signed your kid up for a sport through THPRD, or you signed up yourself up for a class, like maybe I know there's like sewing classes out there. There's sewing classes through 4-H, or you have an activity that you're all doing together. Taking time to just talk to other parents about your kid and about their kid, or asking questions about their kids. Say, hey, I know. So for example, we signed up our kids for an intro to basketball class because they are not very, that's something that they were interested in, and we got them signed up for. And the other parents that were there, I just sat next to some parents, and after being there a few times, started talking to them, asking them questions. Oh, I noticed that it seems like you've been practicing with your kid, and they're like, oh yeah. And then just starting talking about their family, where they're from, and did they grow up in the area, and start building those connections.
So here's another question. So how do you find other kids that you can talk to?
That's an excellent question. I highly recommend finding any activity that your child is interested in and go from there. You know, maybe your kid really wants to try the Olympic sport of fencing, or they would really want to try baking, or they really want to try camping. There are so many amazing organizations here in the area, 4-H included, that really offer opportunities for kids to come together with a common interest. So I'm actually going to make a plug for that now. If you visit our website, wash4h.org, we actually have a few classes that if your kid is interested in, you could sign up, and we do offer financial assistance to fully cover those costs. Not a lot of programs are out there that are like that, and I think there is a lot of opportunities when you are finding activities for your kids to be involved in socially and be connected in common interest activities.
Okay, so in the Q&A, somebody said the chat is disabled, so I'll work on that next. Another question was, what activities are good for ADHD kids? Attention deficit hyperactivity.
I have found, especially with ADHD, anything outdoors can be very, very helpful. Especially now we're coming into the spring, we're coming into the summer. There are so many opportunities to do some really amazing outdoor opportunities. A lot of activities that are completely outside, because there's so many senses that and things that they're feeling that are being activated at one time, and it can be really helpful to be outdoors where they can experience all of those things and be able to be fully invested in an activity. But I think also being a part of other groups that they might, again, have a common interest with and be able to work together.
So another question here. My son is not interested in having any conversation with adults and shuts down. Even during family dinner, he does not contribute much more than a few words, even when asked open-ended questions. We've practiced role-playing conversations, and that hasn't been helpful. He doesn't have any real interest other than chess club, which hasn't been available since before COVID. Any other suggestions?
Yes, that's a really good question. Thank you for asking that as well. I think that starting with what they want, and the first thing that I came to, so in 4-H, we actually have an interest list. We've got things from, hey, do you like horses? Do you like archery? Do you like baking? Do you want to try sewing? Do you want to try, there's something we have called 4-H Wagon Train, where it's a living history about the Oregon Trail. And we actually learn and dress up about individuals that were on the Oregon Trail, learn about state history. Are you interested in, anything at all? And I think whether you're taking something like kind of an inventory of what are you interested in, and then go from there, so you can understand a little more of where you can focus and build up that confidence or anything at all. Because it sounds like, there's a few select things that they really are interested in, and maybe there needs to be some more exploration of what else can we do together, but also giving them that space to choose for themselves and not feel like you have to force something. I mean, it might just be, it's like, hey, we're going to try this out. We need to try something. Let's try this out together and go from there.
Alan, I've got kind of a follow-up question for you. So
yeah.
You touched it on a little bit there and earlier about parents and kind of engagement with their own kids. I don't have a lot of familiarity with 4-H, but you mentioned Scouts earlier. Scouts is one where you have a lot of opportunity for parents to volunteer and kind of be engaged at different levels. Is there that component to 4-H, or is that not something? I was just curious.
Yes, that's exactly right. So we are a volunteer-driven organization. That's how everything that we do is run. It's just myself and a 4-H admin, and we also have a half the time of another individual here who helps with our community partnerships. But 4-H is completely run by volunteers, and that's how we're run very similar to Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout and loved my experience in Scouts, and that's why I wanted to work in outdoor education and work with youth, was because of the experience I had growing up, being mentored by adults that I knew that cared about me. And it wasn't just Scout leaders, but it was my cross-country coach. It was my track coach. It was my student body advisor. It was my grandparents. It was my parents, my church leaders, so when it comes to making sure we have opportunities for our children, it's surrounding them by adults that truly care and that are positive influences that make our kids thrive.
Absolutely. Thank you. Oh, another question, Katie. Oops.
So any suggestions for a shy girl who only likes to read or draw or listen to music as a hobby and has anxiety? I don't want to make her anxiety worse, but want her to connect. She feels confident with adults. She's an only child, but struggles to want to socialize with kids her age, feeling like she doesn't have much in common with them.
Absolutely. So Jenny, I will say that when I was in 5th grade, I was one of those kids. I was a kid who I felt like I was kind of on the outskirts. And I kind of like parallel played with other kids, but I wasn't like friends with other kids. And I think that's okay to start with, is where you have common interests. Like for example, in 4-H, we actually have a group who does art. They do shaded drawing and watercolors and things like that. They're actually doing a class this Saturday. So if you're interested, definitely again, make another plug for that, but they having the opportunities to parallel play or parallel interact where you are focused on an art project, surrounded by others who are also focusing. That's the first start, is just being surrounded by other kids who may have that common interest, and then go from there. Because I think the anxiety is like, may be driven by, oh, I have to talk to these other kids, or I have to interact, where no, it's just the pressure is off on there. You're just here to do this art project, and you just happen to be doing it together with other kids. And that's a beautiful place to start. That's a beautiful place to begin. And then when we're talking about leveling up, it's like, okay, now you're going to talk to the person next to you about what they're doing their art on, or ask what they did this weekend, or really starting those conversations.
So I will say I was a shy person, but I did like to do art. And my mom kept volunteering me for art projects. And, you know, then I would get recognition for that and have to talk to people about that experience. And so it gradually brought me out of my shell. So I think if your daughter has that interest, you know, you can capitalize on it.
Absolutely. And that's what it takes, right? It takes the invitation, or it takes that little step outside the comfort zone, just a little bit. It's a little bit of a challenge. It's not too hard, right? But it's just enough, like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Okay, let's take the next step. And that's totally okay to take those little steps. It doesn't, youth development is not an overnight thing. Helping kids become social is not an overnight thing. Especially when we had a few years where we were not allowed to be social. I mean, that kind of threw a wrench in things. So, great questions.